Why did the Biden administration allow millions of illegal immigrants into the United States? They did it for several reasons. The DNC, in effect, had an unspoken plot to expand their voter base and at the same time break and ultimately bankrupt the U.S. government by uncontrolled spending, by bringing in and supporting ungodly government policies, and overwhelming the social and welfare system by flooding the border with illegal immigrants. These illegal migrants will be placed on the already overburdened social programs that were originally meant for American citizens. By bringing in new migrants, the Democratic leadership would expand their voter base, flood the red states with illegal immigrants, and in return for providing generous welfare and social benefits to these illegal migrants, they would become loyal Democrats by virtue of their numbers. Flip the red states blue, thus keeping the Democrats in power. The Biden administration had purposely loosened border restrictions and did not enforce immigration laws that were already on the books. And with Vice President Kamala Harris as the border czar, it had become obvious that there was an agenda behind the Biden administration in conjunction with the Democratic Party leadership, and even globalists, to flood the border with millions of illegal aliens, which suggested that the Cloward Piven plan was being brought into effect. Once they were settled in the states that they migrated to, the plan was to provide them with government aid, EBT cards flush with generous amounts of cash and food stamp benefits, even enough to buy cars for transportation. All those cities that were designated as sanctuary cities provided generous aid to house these illegal immigrants in the various hotels and motels which the city paid for. Major urban cities such as New York, Chicago, San Francisco, Cleveland, etc. peppered the U.S. map. And such governors and mayors that have essentially ran these cities into the proverbial ground. Mayor Eric Adams, Mayor Brandon Johnson, Daniel Lurie, and Mayor Justin Bibb. All are Democrats. But even worse, criminal gangs such as Trandar Raga and MS-13 were setting up shop in several of the states in the U.S. homicides. Rapes, child trafficking, sex trafficking, fentanyl, and other illegal drug trades began to rise in the sanctuary cities and in the other states. And for all this, these governors and mayors would not even cooperate with the federal government to root out these criminals.
Immigration crackdown ramping up with sweeping raids across the state of Florida. Just as the Supreme Court gives the president a major victory today, revoking the legal status for migrants from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. That means that even as the original ruling is appealed, the Trump administration can deport more than 500,000 people currently in the U.S. from those four countries, even though many arrived legally under a Biden-era program.
It's very important that we're able to get those people out of here fast, bring them back to their country where they belong.
That speed picking up in recent days here in the Sunshine State.
Construction workers were working on this building behind me when law enforcement came from all directions, descending on them, rounding them up in the hundreds.
This construction site in Tallahassee, now the site of one of the largest immigration raids in state history. Workers seen on video Thursday pouring out of the building near FSU campus where they're constructing student housing, still wearing their construction vests, their hands tied.
Seems like yesterday, in some ways, was kind of unprecedented here.
For sure. It's one of the biggest raids we've ever seen, and it involved several state agencies plus ICE. We are hearing that about 200 people showed up for work. More than 100 of them were detained.
Tallahassee immigration attorney Elizabeth Ritchie says she's getting calls by the dozens.
I'm concerned about due process violations. We've been seeing those unfortunately, more and more recently.
Part of the problem here is people are confusing different kinds of government procedures, and they're ignoring what the Supreme Court's already said about this. And what I mean by that is immigration proceedings are civil matters. They're not criminal matters. It's true that in a criminal matter, if the government, for example, is going to prosecute you for murder, yeah, you are entitled to constitutional due process rights, whether you're an alien or a citizen. But when it comes to an immigration issue, if you are an alien who's in the country illegally and the government is moving against you, that's a civil matter. And what the Supreme Court has said in several cases on that issue is that if you are an alien trying to enter the country, you have no due process rights. The government can reject you for any reason or no reason. Once you're in the country, yeah, you do have limited due process rights. But again, what the Supreme Court has said is those due process rights are what Congress decides to give you. And in fact, even, for example, for legal resident aliens, what the Supreme Court has said is, in prior cases, is that due process rights means that the ability of the alien to appear before someone to state their case, whether it is in the executive branch, it doesn't have to be a judicial tribunal. And so if you look at the immigration laws, they only provide certain due process rights. You, for example, are not entitled to a lawyer from the government. The government doesn't have to read you your rights when they arrest and detain you. So your rights are limited. And in fact, there are many particular cases where the immigration law says that for example, the judiciary has no jurisdiction. So again, it depends on the alien, what kind of case it is, and their status.
I wonder, though, if that is complicating the topic a little bit, because the Fifth Amendment, as you well know, provides that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And the Supreme Court has held that people, regardless of their immigration status, come under the heading of person, and that therefore they are basically entitled to due process. So it seems to me there's a bit of, frankly, with all due respect, hair splitting going on in your case, when in fact the right seems pretty clear.
Well, if you want to blame hair splitting, then blame it on the U.S. Supreme Court. Because again, you're confusing a criminal case with a civil case. I mean, for example, again, if you're an alien and the government says you're illegally in the country, you are entitled to a hearing before an immigration judge, not a federal district court judge under Article 3, but an immigration judge. Immigration judges are actually employees of the Justice Department. If you disagree with what that judge says, if the judge says you're not entitled to be in the U.S., you have the right to appeal that case to the Bureau of Immigration Appeals. Again, that is within the Justice Department. The judges there are employees of the Justice Department. If you disagree with that, federal law does not allow you to appeal to a federal district court judge. Your sole appeal is to federal courts of appeals. So, for example, federal district court judges right now who are hearing cases from aliens who have a deportation order lodged against them, because they already had their hearing before an immigration judge, those judges are actually violating federal law by even considering the case.
And Hans, how about this, though? I think one of the arguments that people are making is, but look at what is being done now by the Trump administration with some of these illegal immigrants. They're being detained in facilities, and then they're being shipped off, in some cases, to a prison in El Salvador. So while I agree with you that it's a civil matter and they're not entitled to the same rights in terms of civil matter, the way the Trump administration is carrying this out, almost maybe they're saying it's a civil matter, but it resembles a criminal matter in the ultimate fate of some of these illegal immigrants themselves. Does that complicate the picture at all?
Well, again, it depends on what the status of that alien is. If there's already a deportation order that's been issued by an immigration judge, that means they've had their due process, they've had their hearing. And if what the Department of Homeland Security is doing is simply enforcing that deportation order, in other words, issuing a detainer warrant, finding that alien, arresting them, detaining them, and then shipping them out of the country, they are fully within the provisions of immigration law. And keep in mind, there's about 3 million unenforced deportation orders sitting at the Department of Homeland Security because the Biden administration basically refused to enforce those orders. But that's a different situation than an alien who is detained, who has never had an immigration hearing. That would be a different situation.
Well, there's a strategy. I don't know who's playing the strategy for sure, but the Cloward Piven strategy, I'm sure you've heard of that. Somebody's got to have talked to you about the Cloward Piven.
Can you explain it?
The idea is that you take advantage of a system in the way that it's set up so that you overwhelm it. In particular, in this case, you're going to overwhelm social services. You're going to overwhelm, border enforcement. You're going to overwhelm whatever they're doing in the cities. It's like tens of thousands of dollars per taxpayer or whatever per year going to dealing with what they're calling the migrant crisis. So you try to overwhelm the system in order to basically collapse it so that you can create a crisis, and the crisis creates the excuse to bring in new policies. Oh, well, maybe what we need is, what do they call it? E-Verify or something? So we need a digital system where we can track who everybody is, but then they get their digital system and then you're off to the races. But yeah, this is an old strategy, well documented.
I'm optimistic because there's so much fight left in the American people. We are being pummeled right now by this regime. Every single day. They are trying to destabilize the country. There is a theory called the Cloward Piven political strategy or political theory that was introduced by political theorists back in the 1960s, 1970s. And they said the way that we are going to get left-wing domination, the way that we are going to get Marxist politics is by three things: building a permanent deep state bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., borrowing so much money that we'll never be able to pay back and bankrupting the country, and having mass migration of people from all over the world and flooding the system of immigration. What you are living through right now is not a mistake. It's not that Joe Biden and the current White House, they're stupid. They know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. It's a strategy. It's a plan. They're trying to overload the system so they can break it, so then they can build whatever comes next. And if we have anything to say about it, we're going to say no and keep on building something that's bold and beautiful, hopefully rooted in traditional conservative American values and principles.